Hello, and welcome to the first day of developer sessions at EGX 2014. I'm Ollie Welsh from Eurogamer. We've got loads of exciting sessions today. Later on, we're going to see David Braben introducing Elite Dangerous. We're going to see Alien Isolation, and we're going to have the announcement of the next game in the Total War series. Hello to everyone as well watching on our Twitch stream. We're taking some questions from Twitch as well this year when we can, so if you do have any questions for the developers, please post them in the chat, and I'll try and pick them up and ask them, if we have time, ask them at the end of the session. But for now, introducing us to Dragon Age Inquisition, please welcome Neil Thompson, the Director of Art and Animation from BioWare.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be back in England to present Dragon Age to you. This is the first time I've been back in the UK to present one of BioWare's games, so you know it's a real privilege for me, and I'm delighted that people have showed up in such numbers. Thank you very much. Okay, we thought what we'd do today is talk a little bit about the art direction of Dragon Age Inquisition. We tend not to do that at conferences. We tend to demo the game and allow you an opportunity to play it, which you can do. We have a multiplayer booth out on the floor. I think some of you here have already had a go, and I urge you to go along and play that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the inspirations and the artistic stylings of Dragon Age, but not for too long, and there is very little text. It's predominantly pictures, so don't worry about that. Okay, so let's crack on. What is the premise of Dragon Age? Dragon Age is a dangerous world. The world of Thedas, it's a rich and culturally vibrant environment. There is danger, there is threat, and what art needs to do in an instant like that is to really support the narrative. So we need to support it and not be in opposition to it. So your decisions matter in this game. The evolution of the game as you play, the decisions that you make, they will fundamentally change the way the experience goes from both a moral and an action-based perspective. So when we think of the world of Dragon Age, we really, we think back to the medieval world, these aspects of memento mori, remember you will die, these concepts of doom, gloom, imminent death hang over the world, and that's very much the light-hearted vein we wanted to keep in Dragon Age when we were working towards it. So where do we search for our inspiration? Okay. Technology does not define good art direction. These two images here, one of them is a wondrous image adored by millions and is one of the cornerstones of Western art. I will leave it to you to decide which one that is, but what they share is that they both share the medium of oil paint. And oil paint in the Renaissance was a new medium, And what you could achieve with it was much better, a richness of surface response. And that was one of the key elements to how we looked at Dragon Age Inquisition and its art direction. So where better to look, and bet you thought you'd never turn up to a game conference and have a lecture on the Northern Renaissance, but we're going to do that anyway. So this is our primary reference. This is the one image that Matthew Goldman, who's the art director of Dragon Age, really loves and really wanted to evangelize throughout the team as a way that Dragon Age could be thought of. It's by the work of Hans Holbein, who's a German painter from the 16th century, I think I'm right, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's Sir Thomas More on the right and Erasmus of Rotterdam on the left. And what you can see from these images is the real vibrancy of color and the way that the light falls on the surfaces. The fur looks like fur, the velvet looks like velvet. And that's the kind of rich, lush art direction and color palette that we wanted to work with. So if you break these down into palettes, you can see where the color ranges lie. And this is really what we wanted to get into the artist's head from the start, that this is a rich, vibrant, diverse world. It's not necessarily, in terms of premise, it's a threatening world, but that doesn't mean that from an aesthetic point of view, it has to be dull or restrained. So what do? We start thinking about that in terms of the concept art of the piece. So the concept artists work with the primary aesthetic goals, and they start to produce their pieces. It's a lush world. There's lots of vibrancy, light. My clicker didn't work. There we go. And also changing the atmospherics and changing the time of day. So it's the same location, but just giving a very different feel, more threatening, more pastel, more ambient. And of course, into the fade to get that more otherworldly experience. And then what we need to do is we need to translate this into the 3D world, so the actual environments that you as players will actually experience. So we want that threatening world. We want that richness of detail, but yet beautiful as well as threatening. So we have the bleak side of Thedas. We also have the more romantic side at night. This is in Crestwood Village, which I think if you saw the E3 trailer from a couple of years ago was set in Crestwood. We have the more mysterious side, potentially threatening. There's the more epic side of things. That's Varric approaching, well, probably impending doom. And of course, a sense of wonder and mystery, as well as the rich kind of, the rich civilizations of Orlais, which we haven't really shown before, this kind of level. You see some more of it there. And also the kind of weird, otherworldly stuff as envisaged by the Fade. And of course, we take this same idea of concept through to the characters. So here's our early concept drawings for the followers and some of the specialists there. Then what we do, we work up from a facial characteristic. And what we want to do is very close to the narrative here. We're working very closely with the writers and the designers. What we want is these faces to appear lived in. We don't want anyone bland. These people have lived lives. They're part of a franchise that's endured through 2 games and novels, a movie, and various comic books. And we want to reflect this life and this potentially hard world within their faces. Also the characteristics from a personality perspective. We see a Cassandra here. She's a fairly brisk individual. She can be abrupt and sharp, and we see these in the angles and planes of her face. And we think about this all the time. So then we take it to the 3D realm. The character artists work with the concepts and bring their own inspirations to these. But what we do, rather than, I've got a couple of screens here, and I think what we're trying to do with these release screens is we want to try and put everything out that really gets into the head of the character themselves. So we don't just shoot a character in a random environment. We think about where they're from, we think about their motivations for the game, and we try and present that in a screenshot form. But also, we're all artists. We understand the importance of composition, color, tone, surface response. So we try and produce an image that is also beautiful to look at. So there's kind of a surface meaning that it's Cole, the new character for the game, but also as an image it stands up to scrutiny as just a nicely composed piece of art. So we have Cole there. We have Liliana. She's, of course, the spy master, so we've tried to, she's shrouded, you know, there's this, she's framed by this kind of window-like, there's a sense of mystery to that, it's dark in the background, and this all goes to kind of promote that character and that personality. Same with Sarah, she's a new character for Dragon Age Inquisition. She's seen as kind of light-hearted, she's a bit whimsical, and we tried to reflect that in this shot. And then, of course, Vivienne, an Orlesian, very rich. If you think sort of 17th century Versailles, we're trying to bring that kind of richness and gold and luster to the screen. And we can also do this with the factions. So I've got a few screens here that will hopefully show how the variety transfers through from the environments to the factions themselves, and how this aids ultimately the art direction and for you, the player, to really distinguish what's going on. So we have the members of the Chantry there with their austere, kind of heavy suffering and guilt-laden imagery. And of course the Qunari is much more functional from an architectural standpoint. Various nobles, the Tevintas, all very spiky. And the Inquisition themselves. And the emblem of the Inquisition, the eye. So we're watching you. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is up to you as players and the choices that you make. But there's this idea and concept of always watching, always serving. And you can see how those are built up in terms of recognition from you as the player, with architectural cues and from color cues. And you see how that follows through from the various factions. And I think what's really nice about Inquisition and about Dragon Age as a franchise in particular is it's kind of evolved its own art style within the game. So we take those early influences, but also stuff evolves. So the stained glass windows, which shows it depicts stories from the lore of Dragon Age within the Chantry. And this has its own kind of graphical style that's really become a hallmark of Dragon Age since DA2. And then what I'm really excited about for this time round is that we have these tarot cards, if you will, for multiplayer choice and for race gender selection. And really the guys are broadening the scope of their inspirations. What we're seeing here is the kind of sort of Eastern European storytelling art that kind of we all grew up with, that just sort of promote that sense of wonder and that sense of storytelling, which is essentially what we're doing. We're promoting a story and promoting a fantasy world. And these are really developed to show the nature of the characters as well. So the Dorian the Mage there is quite a mysterious look. It's in that style of Edmund de Lac, who was a 19th century illustrator of fantasy. And Varric there, I think the one of Varric really picks out essentially what he's all about there, which is a chest. Yeah. And then into the race and gender depictions, which are in a much more classic illustrative style. It kind of harks back to that fantasy storytelling that we all enjoy. And there's also I think there's a real touch of the Baroque, which however you want to say it, with the exaggerated posing and the physicality of the figures. I particularly like the center one there. It's not actually linked to the race and gender selection, but I thought it was such a beautiful piece that it deserved to be seen. And then, of course, within the multiplayer, when you're picking the type of player that you want to see, we've got another more illustrative pen and ink style that harks back to the kind of wood-cutting art of the early Renaissance. Okay, so that's the hard bit. In conclusion, build and promote your primary aesthetic direction. That's really getting this idea and getting your prime images, your prime aesthetic sources out there to the rest of the team. Make sure everyone understands that. Make sure people are on board with that. And I think that it's important for people to buy in and to become passionate about what you want to achieve. Gather contextually relevant reference. That's pretty self-explanatory. There's no point searching for sci-fi art when you're doing a fantasy game. But what's really important is to We talk about the idea of cultivating a broad inspirational palette, and it's not just looking within games or the fantasy genre. Really broaden your mind to encapsulate movies and books and fine art and sculpture and architecture and poetry and anything else that really turns you on creatively, and use that and transfer it through to the product, because it will be richer and deeper because of it. And remember that art should support the experience and complement the narrative, not be in opposition to either. Game development is it's where three disciplines come together. It's design, well, four in the case of a narrative-led. It's storytelling, design, art, and engineering. And games work best when those four departments on the leads and the artists and the designers being able to cooperate and understand and be passionate about a shared goal. And art, which is a value, stands up to scrutiny and interpretation. That's an incredibly pretentious thing to say, and I make no apologies for it. As artists, we should have an element of pretentiousness. We like to say that we take our art seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. I think you can take the art of Dragon Age Inquisition and talk about it intelligently and deconstruct it and look at its sources, and it promotes further conversation, and it promotes a deeper interest in the narrative of the game. I think that. I hope you do too. Okay, that's all I'm going to say on art direction. So what we're going to do, we're going to run through a 10-minute segment of the Fallow Maya, which is a single-player experience. It's about 2/3 of the game. And what I'd like you to do, I'll try and narrate this as best I can. So rather than talk about it from a game design perspective, we're going to try and talk about it from an art perspective and what's kind of going through our minds and the thought process as we go. So if we'd like to run the VT. So this is Skyhold, this is your player base, and we talked about kind of epic fantasy worlds. If you're going to have a castle and it's going to be your base, why not have it in the middle of the mountains, towering thousands of feet above everyone else? Because that's epic and that's aspirational. There's our war table, and here we see the introduction to the tarots. They follow through to the world space where we pick. This is our war table. The basic premise of this mission, which if you're a fan of the game you may have seen on YouTube already, is that there's some missing soldiers and we're going to go in and sort them out. But what I want you to think about here is, this is a very threatening environment, but it's not lacking in color. And our prime considerations for a level like this are in terms of how do we lead you, the player, through it from a visual perspective. And a lot of that has to do with silhouette, with lighting, guiding the player. But that doesn't mean that you can't wander off into the midst. Exploration is a core pillar of Dragon Age Inquisition as an experience. So while we want to guide you through as much as possible so that you can complete the critical path, we also want to encourage you to diverge from that path and wander around. And the way we do that is to basically put interesting stuff on the left and right of the path, so that you're encouraged to just kind of head off into the wherever. What promotes interest from a visual sense? Well, silhouette is a great start. You can see in the distance there that we've got the fortress that you're ultimately going to guide to. And just having that silhouetted, the crenellations, it kind of makes you interested. It promotes excitement, and off you go. We adopted the Frostbite engine for this game, and we talked about surface response and how that can be better realized. You can see this from the ground. If you look at the water there, our technical artists spent a lot of time working on shaders that would give the maximum response, whether it's leather, whether it's metal, whether it's water. We've been working on an idea for a while now of kind of rolling composition. So, composition is traditionally thought of as a static thing. You can compose a frame beautifully. But what we want to do in a game environment when we're trying to lead you through is that the rolling composition provides interesting composition on the frame at all times, which is tricky to do because, you know, in a 3D world you can wander off wherever you want. So it's important that there's space. You can't just clutter the environment with stuff and hope people try and make sense of it visually. You can't do it. So what we try and do is the negative space is important as the positive. So the torches on the stairway there are a fairly unsubtle encouragement to just kind of progress in that way. That's a fairly toasty way to die. And I hope all you'll notice from this as well, it's a dark area, it's set at night, the weather's fairly gloomy. It still has a rich aesthetic. You know, it's not desaturated, it's colorful, it's vibrant. It's a living space. Which the cinematic there was just to guide you through. And in terms of the cinematics, you know, we're very much, the cinematic direction for Dragon Age is very traditional. We wanted it to be shot as if you had a physical rig. There's no extreme camera pans that you can do with motion captured rigs. It's all as if you had a physical 70mm Panavision camera that you could dolly and put on tracks. I think that harkens back to those kind of fantasy movies that, well, certainly I loved as a kid. You know, the things like Conan and that sort of thing, where it's all very traditional. Cinematically, it's very traditional. It relies on wonderful lighting and beautiful composition. And Arnold, of course, lest we forget. So again, lots of framing there, the brightness in the background, the holes in the roof that allow shards of light that focus on the gameplay area. And there's a little nod to what can be achieved if, you know, once the combat is finished. There's illuminated side chambers there, just with a little bit of torchlight. And here we're going to move into TACCAM. So the combat was obviously getting a bit too much for whoever was playing this. And that's the great thing about Dragon Age. If you're finding the combat too challenging or you want to approach it in a different way, then you can go into TACCAM, freeze the action, move around, and use your party a little bit more strategically. And it's just a different way of playing. You know, it doesn't preclude you playing from a third-person perspective, but it gives you a more fulfilling experience if you swap and choose between the two. So obviously struggling to dispatch this guy. And of course, you know, there's multiple abilities, each with their own set of VFX. Again, the VFX add that extra layer of richness and lushness and color and vibrancy. You know, there's a lot going on. One of the problems we have as a creative team is sometimes to scale down the effects because they become too much. If you have a party of 4, 5 with enemies, they're all shooting off spells and abilities left, right, and center, then it can be overwhelming for you as a player and it becomes difficult to actually understand what's going on. So we've consciously scaled some of that down so that you can understand and the combat does make sense and you can make strategic decisions without having to guess. So I think I'm just going to upgrade there. There's extensive customization, as I'm sure you would expect from an RPG of this size. And they've completed the mission. There are the soldiers. It's another blow for the Inquisition. We've increased our power. The way you progress through the game really is to increase your power and influence over the world. Again, you'll see the framing there, the silhouette. There's no debate about who is the the premier character in this scene. We use the archway to silhouette. We use the backlighting. If you're really lucky, we get a nice lightning charge behind it that really adds to the effect. But it's random, so.
I'll join you. Let me make peace with my kid and I'll find where you said you'll fly.
And there we go. He's going to join the Inquisition, and you have increased your strength and influence in this particular area. And increasing that strength and influence allows you to progress through the game more quickly. Okay, so that was the game demo. Now we're going to close on another video, which is the villains trailer, which will show you a little bit more about some of the characters that we're bringing into Dragon Age Inquisition. So let's run through.
Tell me, where is your maker now? Call him. Call down his wrath upon me. You cannot, for he does not exist.
They are under the command of the Venatori, in service to something called the Elder One.
The Templars come to kill you.
To withstand this monster, we must control the battle.
More pain this time. The Elder One still comes. You are a mistake. You should never have existed. Bow before your new god and be spared.
Too soon, too soon. Thank you very much. I hope this was of interest. Thanks for turning out.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for a fascinating talk. We have a few minutes for questions, so we're going to bring mics out into the two aisles. If you could line up behind the two mics, and then I'll take questions from each mic alternately. And if you could step nice and close to the mic so we can hear you, that would be great. Any questions? Over here.
My question is, like, you talked a lot about you wanting to change the art in a certain way, but so far Dragon Age has gone through a few different art styles. So between Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age 2, and even with Dawn of the Seeker, the film you talked about, they've got very distinct art styles. Mm-hmm. So how did you sort of make this game different but still feel like Dragon Age?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there are obviously technology limitations whenever you work, particularly in games where the hardware changes on maybe a 5-6 year cycle and you have to fundamentally rethink the paradigm of how you do things. I think we've tried to understand very clearly what Dragon Age could be for some time now. And I think with Inquisition, we set out with these aesthetic goals of the Northern Renaissance and this aura that it's a threatening and diverse world, but also very rich. And it just encourages you to think along the lines of vibrant color, not gaudy, but colorful. And it's incredibly diverse. I think if you think back to the locations trailer, which we showed at the beginning of the show, going from the snowy peaks to the wilderness of the desert to the lush forests, but it's all colorful And I think that's what ultimately is going to tie the Dragon Age franchise together, particularly as we go forward on ever-increasing strength in terms of hardware, is that we're no longer restricted in terms of color palette. You know, in previous generations maybe, and you saw this in films as well, people used to lean towards a more desaturated palette for work because it's easier for everything to conform, everything to sit together in the final frame. We no longer have those kind of restrictions, so we can you know, go a little bit more wild, if you like.
Thanks.
Okay.
Over this side.
Hi there. With the characters such as Hawk and that, where you can customise them in Dragon Age 2, they do have a default appearance.
Mm-hmm.
How would you go about doing that for if the Warden were to appear in Dragon Age Inquisition? How would you do that for a character that was completely customisable?
Well, I said there are limits to that, but what we can do is there's a standalone application called the Keep, which what it enables you to do is to take your choices from Dragon Age Origins and from DA2 and implement them as a game state in DAI. You don't have to do that, but it's one way of making those choices and having them follow through. You can also, if you've never played either of the first two games, that's fine. You can either use the Keep to set up a random set of choices that you think will provide an interesting starting point, or you can just go straight into Inquisition at all. But that game state, those choices you made from Origins and DA2, you can propagate that through using the Keep.
Okay, our amazing elven friend over here.
It's more sort of between the books. When people are reading novels, they form their own idea of what the character looks like. Was that difficult to then bring the character from the novels into the game world, sort of from a visual perspective?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, it's incredibly difficult because I think we're very aware that Dragon Age is a franchise now, and a lot of people really love it, right? And they really identify with characters, not necessarily through the games, but from the novels, as you say. We obviously have to be sympathetic to that when we try and visualize them. And I think, you know, in any creative endeavor, you're not going to always please all the people all the time, but we try. I mean, we talked about the character generation. We try to get in the heads of the character from a narrative perspective and just from the world in which they live in order to realize how they appear physically. And that's basically the process that we go through.
Okay, over here.
Hi. I was just wondering if you had any maybe tips or tricks to game artists avoiding cliche. I mean, you're looking at references that I think maybe some other people have looked at, and you have a brief that may sound like other people's briefs, but Dragon Age always comes out very concise and unique. And I was wondering if you had any ideas.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it goes back to that, you know, that idea of the broad inspirational palette, right? I think people are doing themselves a disservice if they're working in a medium like games, like films, like traditional artwork, and you're only taking your inspiration from that medium. I think by necessity it's gonna stifle you creatively. I think what we encourage at BioWare and what certainly all the artists are really interested in is that their interests are you know, extend way beyond the bounds of video games. You know, there's lots of really good inspiration to be had from every aspect of life, and there's no excuse to not look at it really, because we have this wonderful thing called the internet, where, you know, the sum total of human creativity is there at your disposal at any time. You know, if you want to look, I mean, Google the Northern Renaissance. I encourage you to do that when you go home, and you will see a vast panoply of art that is both beautiful and inspiring. And that's just one idea. There are many. I think, you know, I really want to encourage that.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question over here.
Hi, my question is regarding the Frostbite 3 engine. Obviously, this is an engine BioWare has never used before, and obviously we could see in the demo that the art style has been massively upgraded because of it when you compare it to like Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Origins. My question is, you said before it's offered you new creative freedoms. So like being the head of art and animation, what type of creative freedoms has the Frostbite 3 engine offered you exactly? Would you say it's made it easier for you, more interesting, harder? Like, what creative freedoms does it offer?
All of those things. Game development is difficult. You know, if it was easy, anyone would do it. And the development of DA has been challenging. But I think any creative endeavor that is of value should be challenging. What Frostbite 3 has given us really, I think primarily we look at the lighting and we look at the surf response that enables to provide a much richer world. You know, that first slide with the Mona Lisa and the other picture. You know, same medium, same technology, if you like, vastly differing aesthetic results. So you can take, you know, Frostbite is not a panacea. It is a fabulously powerful engine that enables you to do wonderful things, but only if you understand what it is you're trying to achieve. You know, you can't just take it and just wing it. You know, there's art direction really, if it works to a plan and there's a consistency to it, it brings you know, a beautiful consistency to the entire game. And we talk very often about this concept of the final frame. So as an art director, your primary concern is the final frame. How do things sit on the screen when you're playing the game? You know, nothing should stand out as being you know, out of place. You know, everything's got to sit perfectly. Good art direction will provide that. A fantastic engine will allow you to get there. Okay.
Thank you.
Terrific. That's all we've got time for. Thank you for coming. If you're on Twitch, thank you for watching. Stick around for David Brayman presenting Elite Dangerous at the top of the hour. But for now, thank you to Neil Thompson from BioWare.
Thank you.